Biggest names come to work every day. In fact, we have one of those big names on the tram here today to tell you a little bit about how Universal Studios came to be. He's an accomplished actor and a respected filmmaker, one of the most respected in the industry, as a matter of fact. The director of Apollo 13 Backdraft and the upcoming Dr. Seuss's How the Grinch Stole Christmas. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Ron Howard.
Hi, I'm Ron Howard, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to the Universal Studio Tour. You know, more movies and television shows have been shot on this lot than any other location in the world. And today, you're going to see it all. But before we get too far into the tour, let me give you the setup for our story. Universal got its start in 1912 when visionary Carl Laemmle brought his movie company west and opened Universal Pictures. On March 15, 1915, Mr. Laemmle invited the public to visit the studio, and the Universal Studio Tour was born. You see, Mr. Laemmle believed that movies should make people laugh, cry, and sit on the edge of their seats. For the last century, Universal has been doing just that. I'll be back to check up on you guys a little later. In the meantime, I'm going to turn things over to your guy. Have a great time, everybody.
Thanks, Ron. I call him Ron. We're going to take you down our movie timeline, which traces our history from 1914 to the present. The giant movie posters you'll see on either side of the tram are just a few examples of the over 8,000 movies that have been made here. Over the years, we've taken audiences from ancient Rome to the Wild West, from the jungles of Africa to the streets of New York, from the bottom of the ocean to the surface of the moon. And for most of that time, we've never even left our property. How's that possible, you ask? Well, Hollywood is based on illusion. Nothing is what it appears to be in Hollywood, and on today's tour, we'll be giving you some great examples of that. Now, as I mentioned, we are a real working studio, and at over 415 acres, it takes an entire city to support it. Universal City has its own mayor, bank, post office, and fire station. This white building on the right is Station 51. It's a real fire station that follows its name from the popular 70s TV show Emergency, which filmed right here on our lot. Now, Station 51 is where we leave the real world behind and enter the world of cinematic make-believe. We're about to take you down onto our front lot, which houses our 35 sound stages. Inside these sound stages, we can create any environment the story demands, and a great example of that is coming up straight ahead at Soundstage 12. This big beige building behind me is one of the largest stages in the world, and we've built some of the largest sets in movie history in there, including Whipstaff Manor from Casper, The Riddler's Lair from Warner Brothers' Batman Forever, Dracula's Castle, Frankenstein's Lab, and the Visitor Center from Steven Spielberg's blockbuster thriller Jurassic Park. The Visitor Center was constructed inside Soundstage 12. During shooting, the filmmakers had to simulate the destruction caused by the T-Rex, so when she was added in later with computer animation, it would look absolutely believable. Recently, Stage 12 was used as Whoville for Ron Howard's upcoming Dr. Seuss's How the Grinch Stole Christmas, starring one of the funniest actors in Hollywood, Mr. Jim Carrey, in the title role. While we're on the subject of Mr. Carrey, he's in Soundstage 25 here on the left, where we filmed those hilarious courtroom scenes from Liar Liar. Here's a brief outtake from that film. Mr. Carrey's no stranger to our lot. He was here a few years ago filming Man on the Moon. These days, Soundstage 25, they're shooting NBC television series Providence. And it was in Soundstages 24 and 25 that we filmed scenes from Nutty Professor 2, The Clump, starring Eddie Murphy, Eddie Murphy, Eddie Murphy, Eddie Murphy, Eddie Murphy, Eddie Murphy, and Janet Jackson. And coming up on the right is the oldest structure on our front lot. This is Soundstage 28. 75 years ago, Universal invented the horror film inside this soundstage. It was constructed in 1925 to house the elaborate Paris Opera House sets for Phantom of the Opera, starring Lon Chaney Sr. in his most famous film role. Now, normally sets are taken down immediately to make way for the next production, but no one's dared dismantle the Phantom sets because Stage 28 is believed to be haunted. Speaking of studio superstition, there is no Soundstage 13 on our lot, but we did shoot scenes from Apollo 13 coming up on the left in Soundstage 27. And here once again is Ron Howard, that film's director. Tell you a little more about it.
Realism was an essential element for Apollo 13. We thought about filming in Houston, Texas, where the original control room for the Apollo mission still exists. Unfortunately, NASA's engineers didn't have filmmaking in mind when they built Mission Control. We had to build our own mission control inside Stage 27. Everything had to be exact, even down to the tiniest detail.
And In addition to blockbuster movies like Apollo 13, we're also the largest music company in the world with artists like U2, Aerosmith, Limp Bizkit, and Shania Twain. But we also have a long-standing history of creating and producing some classic television shows. More TV shows have been produced on this lot than any other studio in the world, and many of them were shot in these sound stages coming up on the right. Take a look at this, see how many of them you can remember. These days, we've been working on Emmy-nominated Law & Order and Law & Order Special Victims Unit, as well as comedies, Just Shoot Me and The Steve Harvey Show. And we also produce Blind Date, hosted by Roger Lodge. This enormously successful game show sets up singles and humorously dissects their dates. And television works at a very fast schedule. From first rehearsal to final taping takes about a week. Movies are a whole different story. They take months, sometimes years to complete and involve literally hundreds of people. So where do all these movies and TV shows come from? Most of them get started in these little beige bungalows here on the left. These are production offices for some of Hollywood's biggest writers, producers, actors, and directors who currently have a development deal with the studio. Development is the stage of the process where a filmmaker has an idea for a movie and tries to get it produced, which makes it sound a lot easier than it actually is. Now, in the early days, these bungalows were used as dressing rooms to stars under contract to Universal. Stars like Walt Hudson, Doris Day, Jimmy Stewart, and Lucille Ball. As we drive past bungalow number 5195, you'll probably recognize the familiar silhouette painted next to the doorway. It is the incomparable Alfred Hitchcock, who directed such memorable movies as Rear Window, Vertigo, Psycho, and The Birds, just to name a few. He's kind of peeking over the hedge here at 5195. He was known for his cameo appearances. He found a way to work himself into almost every movie he ever made. See how many times you can spot him here.
My name is Alfred Hitchcock. We don't want no messenger. You'll see them fly.
These days, the Hitchcock bungalow is being used by Dino De Laurentiis, who's in development for the movie Hannibal, sequel to Silence of the Lambs, so look for that. Well, now we're making a transition from our front lot out onto our back lot, where the world is just around the corner. We shoot the big stuff out here, exteriors on a very large scale. Now, many of the buildings you'll be seeing out here look like they're made out of brick and stone, especially the ones coming up on the right, just past the storage area, where you'll see some props from The Grinch. I said Hollywood is based on illusion. They look like they're made out of brick and stone. They're made out of foam, rubber, fiberglass, and other lightweight materials. And if you look closely, you'll see they're not even real buildings. They're called facades. Facade is a French word meaning false front. We only build what the camera's going to see. So for exterior shots, we really only need the fronts and sides of the buildings. Now the next street that we'll be passing, we call it Brownstone Street. One side is residential brownstones. Across the street is more of a business district. That way we can put the camera right in the middle of the street and simply by turning the camera around, make it look like we've gone to an entirely different section of town. We use these sets over and over, changing them every time, so hopefully you won't recognize them from one production to the next. But most of you will have no trouble at all recognizing the area we're coming into now. Welcome to Courthouse Square, better known as Hill Valley from the Back to the Future movies starring Christopher Lloyd and Michael J. Fox. Here on the right is the famous clock tower. It was at the top of this building that Doc Brown had to harness the 1.21 gigawatts of power required to send Marty McFly back to the future. Michael J. Fox had to give a very versatile performance in the Back to the Future trilogy. He played a teenage Marty, a middle-aged Marty, his son Marty Jr., his daughter Marlene, and even a distant relative from the 1800s. Courthouse Square gave an equally versatile performance, having to appear in several different time periods. There was 1955, 1985, and even a futuristic 2015. And we do most of our filming inside sound stages because they're 98% soundproof and we have optimum control over lighting and sound. Sometimes sometimes it becomes necessary to build an entire section of a city inside a soundstage. We have an example of that coming up in a soundstage ahead, a helicopter chase scene through the streets of New York at night. I can't tell you the name of the production, but it does feature one of the biggest stars in Hollywood, so keep your cameras out. He's supposed to be on the set today. We're going to turn here onto Old Fulton Avenue and take you right on in. Here we go. There's your good one. No, bad monkey, bad monkey. Here. Oh, good. Oh, Jim, this bridge is not so very secure anymore. I think we better get out of here. It does smell like banana, so maybe he's already eaten. I don't know. But just in case the doors aren't opening and the second car is stuck on the bridge, I'm just gonna, you know, if you're wearing yellow, you might want to cover up so you don't look so much like a big banana. Wow, that was close. Well, I promised you a big star, and at 30 feet and over 13,000 pounds, they don't get a whole lot bigger than King Kong. King Kong is what we call a mechanical effect. The award winner this sting, and it was 1960s London for New Line Cinema's Austin Powers, The Spy Who Shagged Me. Well, let's take a look and see how many different places we can make our metropolitan sets look like. Directors love to use New York Street in scenes of chaos and destruction. Many directors got their start right here at Universal. John Ford, George Mindy. It's coming up on the right. It was built back in 1916 for his silent film Descent, which sadly was never completed. But the bridge still stands. It's one of the largest freestanding sets in Hollywood, though it's kind of fallen into disrepair the last few years. As I say, we don't really come up here too much anymore. But do keep your cameras out. We're going to take you on the road that goes just above and behind the bridge, so you still get a really good picture of this historic set. Oh, except that road's closed. Okay, well, oh no, we can't go over the bridge. There were beams falling. He's just naughty. JL wants to go over Smithy Bridge. Okay, well, I'm sure it's really sturdy. It's been standing here for 80 years. How much do you think this tram weighs? 70, 80,000 pounds? Okay. So good. Okay, we tricked you a little bit there, JL and I. He made me do it. I'm telling Mom. Like I said, Hollywood's full of tricks and illusions. The bridge was not built in 1916. It was built in the 1970s. It works on hydraulics. And as we drive past it again, we'll be able to see it put itself right back together. Our bridge has been seen in many movies and TV shows like Quantum Leap, The $6 Million Man, and The Bionic Woman. Now, Alan Smithee actually was a legendary Hollywood director. Sort of. That's the name the Directors Guild would use when a filmmaker did not want his name in the credits of a movie that he'd made. So even though he wasn't a real live person, he had his own biography, several fan clubs, and unfortunately a long list of movies to his credit. Classics like Blood-Sucking Pharaohs in Pittsburgh. Don't know why the director didn't want his name on that one. So next time you're channel surfing looking for an old movie to watch in the middle of the night, and the title directed by Alan Smithee comes up, you might want to keep on surfing. Probably not your best choice. Well, we don't want you to think everything in Hollywood is fake. Take a look off to the left side of the tram and you'll see some honest-to-goodness nature. This is our greens department where we house all of our real and artificial plants for our productions. As I said, we do most of our filming inside sound stages. Sometimes we need to build a forest like the one you saw in E.T., the extraterrestrial. And we came here to our greens department for that too. Now, the big rocks and tree stumps that you'll see on the left side of the tram, they're not real. They're made out of styrofoam and foam rubber. And all of our plants and trees are kept either in pots or on skids with wheels. If you look closely, some of the tree trunks even have handles. It makes them very easily moved from our greens department out to our sets and back again. Very often we'll use a combination of both real and artificial plants for a production. Sometimes you get just the right look we're going for, but very often real plants would not hold up under the intense heat from the lamps inside our sound stages. So by using artificial trees, if a leaf falls off a tree, we can always just staple it right back on. Now, as promised, our first miniature is coming up on the left. This is called a forced perspective miniature. And if you look at your screens, you'll see how we can make this look like a snowy mountainside. We force blizzard fluid through high-pressure nozzles to create snow on screen. Miniatures are used in Hollywood when it would be too difficult or too expensive to build the set full size, or to move an entire company to a remote location. Speaking of which, welcome to Site B from the Lost World Jurassic Park. This Fleetwood RV Mobile Lab coming up on the left is the one that was dangling over that cliffside in Costa Rica after being shoved over the edge by a very angry mom and dad T-Rex with Jeff Goldblum, Julianne Moore, and Vince Vaughn stuck inside. Actually, it was dangling over a parking structure down on our front lot that had been dressed to look like a massive cliffside. And if the wind doesn't blow it all away, we're going to show you how we make fog here in the movies too. It's a little breezy up here. Down on our sets, fog is created by something called a lawn fogger. You push it around kind of like a lawnmower, and it dispenses fog at the push of a button. All of the cages and vehicles that you see on the left side of the tram were used in the Lost World Jurassic Park. The very last cage on the end was the high hide that they put Vanessa Lee Chester in an attempt to get her up out of biting height. Well, you've heard the expression, time is money. That's especially true here in Hollywood, where the average summer blockbuster can cost as much as $1 million per minute of finished film. So even though the real Mexico is only a couple hours away, we found it more cost-effective to build our own Mexico here in our backlot. Our Mexico sets have been seen in movies like Orion's Three Amigos, starring Steve Martin, Chevy Chase, and Martin Short. Keep an eye up the street here on the left side of the tram. The ground is wet because I'm going to do one more little weather demonstration for you. First, we're going to roll in some thunder and lightning. Now that lightning is produced by high-intensity lamps that generate 250,000 watts of electricity. And usually when those thunder clouds come rolling through, we get rain. This is the way we would set up an exterior rain scene. If you look up, you'll see the rain is coming from sprinklers in the tops of the trees, the power poles. It's shot straight up in the air, so it falls down naturally, just like real rain. And by using sprinklers, we can actually turn the rain on and off whenever we need to after a take. Mother Nature doesn't always cooperate that well. Speaking of going off, that's really the end of my weather demonstration. And the rain was supposed to go off right there. Well, we may be having some technical difficulties. Hello. But you know, bad things happen in Southern California when we get too much rain. Things like flash floods coming straight for the tram. Look out! So that flood effect is created by dumping thousands of gallons of recycled water from giant tanks up at the top of the hill. That water is then recycled up into the drinking fountains in our park for your drinking pleasure. Now it just goes back to the top of the hill for the next tram. I promise. That is the same effect they used for the flood scenes in The River starring Mel Gibson and Sissy Spacek. And even though our flash flood area was specifically designed and created for our guests on our studio tour to show you our little rain demonstration in flash flood, it has been seen in some movies. They've used it. It was the Noah's Ark attraction in the Bible-Land, at the Bible-Land amusement park in Fletch Lives, starring Chevy Chase. They had a big wooden ark posted there that said Noah's Ark flash flood every 10 minutes. It was also seen in our disaster movie Earthquake. But you'll remember Earthquake took place in Los Angeles, not Mexico. We covered the Mexican facades with garage doors, put fencing and cars and trucks out there, and it became a back alley in Los Angeles for Earthquake. Well, now we're going to take you across the border from Old Mexico into the Old West and take you through our 6 Points, Texas, show you some of our old Western sets. Now, this area is called 6 Points, Texas, because at one time there were 6 different streets that all came together into one area. Back in the early 1900s when Carl Laemmle opened Universal Studios, he was cranking out as many as 200, 250 movies every year. Now each one of those streets had everything it needed to be its own town. Sheriff's office, jail, post office, saloon, general store. That way, that is how we could make so many movies in such a short period of time. We could put a camera crew on each one of those streets and actually shoot 6 movies all at the same time. And it didn't matter how much noise they made back then. They were all silent films in the early 1900s. Well, let's take a look at some of the cowboys who've roamed the streets of our 6 Points, Texas over the years. As we were coming down the hill at the beginning of the tour, I said we can take you from the bottom of the ocean to the surface of the moon. Well, no, this is not the bottom of the ocean on the right. Actually, the bottom of the ocean is coming up on the left. It's this big round thing coming up here. This funny looking contraption is our underwater tank. We fill it up with water, throw our actors in there, and then we stay nice and dry. We open the hatches on the outside and film through the windows.
I found the snake!
But what about the surface of the moon? Well, we're driving over it. This asphalt road was transformed into the surface of the moon that Tom Hanks walked over in a dream sequence for Apollo 13. Sound hard to believe? Try this one on for size. This park here on the right, that is New York Central Park. Well, at least as much as the camera needs to see. And the body of water behind it is the entire Pacific Ocean. It's true. Countless movies and TV shows have made this small body of water look like an entire ocean on film. They do that with very tight camera angles, editing, and highly detailed movie miniatures like the quarter scale sub you see out here that we used for the underwater torpedo scenes for our World War II submarine thriller U-571. And we also had a full-size 600-ton seaworthy model that we used for the surface scenes in that movie. See if you can tell the difference between the two of them. Now this area is also interesting because this is where we filmed A Showboat, starring Irene Dunn, Paul Robeson, and Hattie McDaniel, who of course went on to win an Academy Award. Whoa! Gina, we don't have room to turn around, do we? Can we back up? Then we could be here for a minute. You do know that your seat backs and cushions are flotation devices. We just dog paddle. Actually, wait a minute. What am I thinking? We're in Hollywood. All we need is a miracle. I saw this in a movie once. I'm going to give it a try. Cross your fingers, just in case. Part the waters. Please. Is it working? I'm afraid to look. Pretty, please? I did mention there was a possibility of getting wet. With sugar on it? And a cherry and sprinkles? This, of course, is the parting of the Red Sea, inspired by Paramount's 10 Commandments, an oldie but a goodie here on the Universal Studio Tour. We will be driving through the Red Sea. As we do so, once the tram starts moving, I do need to make sure everybody is sitting down, please. You might want to pick up anything off the floor that you don't want to get wet. Sometimes the floor gets wet. Yeah, like your little footsie. But do keep your cameras out, because you'll get a great sea level picture. Our Red Sea has been seen in many TV shows and movies, like, maybe most notably 20th Century Fox's Mel Brooks' History of the World Part 1. Now also, as we're driving through, you're going to want to look off to the left, and you'll see the Black Lagoon from Creature from the Black Lagoon, and it's the same area where Norman Bates stashed his victims' bodies in Psycho. Sometimes the floor gets wet. It's just our feet, though. Well, that was pretty cool. We did mostly we're dry. We got all the way through the Red Sea and didn't really even get wet. Well, we're not all the way through yet, are we? So it's a wet street. There we go. Well, we're mostly dry, and I was going to say likely to stay so, but, you know, you just never know here on the Universal Studio Tour, so be prepared for anything. Now, this big beige building coming up on the left is our property warehouse. We have the largest collection of props in the industry with well over 1 million. Remember, I also said the world is just around the corner. We're going to prove that as we take you to Europe. These are our little Europe sets here on the left. We call them that because we can transform them into any European town simply by changing the language on the signs and the storefronts. If you were watching The Wonderful World of Disney a couple of months ago, you would have seen our Little Europe in the live-action Pinocchio story, Geppetto, starring Drew Carey and Julia Louis-Dreyfus. In the fourth car, I do need everybody please sitting on the blue cushions on their seats, please, while the tram is moving. Thank you. Also, New Line Cinema filmed some scenes from Magnolia in our Little Europe. Well, we're in luck. You know those big summer action blockbusters I was telling you about? Well, they're filming one in the soundstage just ahead. It's Sunday, and the crew's not here, but they did leave a hot set, and we wanted to show you what a hot set looks like. Now, this soundstage is unique because it covers the only two-level set in Hollywood. On the level above us, we've recreated a busy urban street scene with cars and trucks, storefronts, sidewalks. Down here, we've constructed a San Francisco subway station. I mentioned this is a hot set. What that means is the set is fully dressed and ready to start filming. Oh, that's just one of our little California tremors. We get them from time to time. Nothing to worry about. It's ready to start filming. Uh-oh. Oh, this looks like this could be the big one, folks. Hold on. Uh-oh. There's our busy urban street scene now in the back on the left. Look out! Okay, everybody please remain seated and stay calm. I'm sure we'll be perfectly fine. Everybody stay calm. Uh-oh, sidewalk's breaking up on the right. Oh. Gio, do you know how to get to my house? Because I think I just want to go home now. Please. Oh, what's that? That sounds like a train whistle. What is a train whistle? There's a train coming. Push that bridge for that train to go up. Okay, I think it's over, Jail. We better get these people out of here before something else happens. Like a tidal wave! Ladies and gentlemen, was our quick, big one, large-scale mechanical effects like the one in which we just took part of and used extensively in our disaster movies. They take weeks to shoot and involve dozens of cuts. But when it all comes together, the effect can be pretty amazing, sometimes only for a moment or two on screen. As you can see by the sign coming up on the left, we're going to take you into Amity, the small town that was terrorized by a great white shark in Steven Spielberg's Academy Award-winning Jaws. And Jaws was so successful for Universal that we decided to retire the film star, a shark named Bruce, to his very own private lake here on our back lot. You know, it's just about lunchtime, and we've attached his lunch to this yellow buoy that's out here in the water. So if we're lucky, he'll make an appearance for us today. We may even get to see a fin or something in the water. Yeah, there he is. See, he's going right for it. No, he's turning. Where's he? He's not going for it. He's going away from it. Where's he? Oh, hey, you know what? You should not be fishing out there right now. It's lunchtime. We've got food in the water. He's going to, you know what? You're going to ruin his appetite. You should, hello? Well, he had a lot of guts to be fishing out there. There they are. Oh, there's something you don't see every day. Unless, of course, you're me. And then you see it 4 or 5 times a day. But it never gets old, especially this next part. Let's keep an eye on that yellow buoy and see if he's still hungry. Oh, he took it. Uh-oh, he's taking the road too. Hold on. I'd like to introduce you to Bruce, the shark from Jaws. Face to face with Bruce the mechanical shark who terrorized millions of moviegoers in Jaws. And I know what you're thinking. Up close, that big plastic shark looks pretty fake, doesn't it? But I saw you guys jump like that. I even heard some screaming. Actually, the fact that he terrorized anybody is really a tribute to the film's director, Steven Spielberg, who had to use clever camera angles and editing to transform his malfunctioning special effect into one of the most terrifying creatures ever seen on screen.
That's a much maligned shark. It didn't at all. Wherever you go,
Just leave them out.
the sharks were well enough for a while there and it was so high. So I really overshark a lot.
And you might also have recognized our Jaws Lake area as the quaint New England town of Cabot Cove, Maine from Murder, She Wrote, starring Angela Lansbury. Now here on the right is Miss Mona's Chicken Ranch. It was built for the best little whorehouse in Texas. And it looks pretty good today, but it was looking pretty spooky a couple of months ago. Rock superstar Rob Zombie was here. He's making his directorial debut for Universal Studios. It's a horror film in the classic tradition called House of a Thousand Corpses. And if you come back next month, you get a sneak peek at that movie before it comes out. He's going to make a special attraction for our Halloween Horror Nights that we run in October here at Universal. So be sure and look out for that. And keep your cameras out. We're going to take you down our Colonial Street, where we do a lot of our residential filming. Many movies, TV shows, commercials, music videos, even print work for magazine ads have been shot out here. And if you look on either side of the street, you'll see signs that tell you about some of the past and current residences of our Colonial Street. Nice around here today too, but wow, this neighborhood has seen some bad times over the years. It was infested by vampires in Fox's Buffy the Vampire Slayer. It was blown to bits in the burbs. It was terrorized by a guy named Freddy in Nightmare on Elm Street Part 6, and it was completely destroyed by a killer comet in Paramount DreamWorks' Deep Impact. Now, the Colonial Mansion here on the right from Uncle Tom's Cabin also doubled as the sanitarium that they sent Jimmy Stewart to in the movie Harvey. Well, we've gotten a chance to see how they look in person. I'm going to give you a chance to see how they look in some of your favorite films. very nice neighborhood, don't you think? We have a very special neighborhood coming up, and I'm going to let Ron Howard set this one up for you.
Now I have a little surprise for you. We'd like to show you an exclusive sneak peek at an upcoming Universal production. This is something we created just for you, our guests on the studio tour. I hope you enjoy it.
Up on the right, they'll be on the right as we turn the corner here, are the Whoville houses that we used for the Grinch for the exteriors. They're here temporarily until we find a permanent home for them here on the tour. They've been moved from a little further up the hill, and we'll see that in a minute or two. But while they're here, the Grinch is not the only creepy neighbor they have. I'd say Norman Bates qualifies as a pretty creepy neighbor. Coming up on the right, this is the Bates Motel from Alfred Hitchcock's 1960 classic thriller, Psycho. And the Psycho houses looming up on the hill there. Now the facade on the left is also a Psycho house. The one on the right is the original. The one on the left was used in the 1998 Gus Van Sant remake with Vince Vaughn and Anne Heche. Now speaking of creepy, something pretty creepy happened a couple of years ago. As one of the trams was passing the Psycho house, a man dressed as Mother with a wig and a huge knife came bursting out of the front door of the house, jumped onto the tram, scared the living daylights out of the guests on the tram, and then disappeared. Nobody knew who it was until we found out a couple of weeks later. It was comedian Jim Carrey, passing time on a break between filming scenes for Man on the Moon. He just thought he'd come and scare the wits out of the guests on the tram. Nobody recognized him. None of the guests, the guide, the driver, nope, we didn't know who it was for weeks. I'm sure he thought it was hysterical. Now coming up on the left, this is the area where the houses were when they did the filming for the Grinch, and you can still see some of the snow on the ground. But we did have to move them because the dinosaurs are coming back. The rumors were true. And since we already have the communication center from the Lost World Jurassic Park here on the left, we're going to rebuild and extend Site B out in front of the communication center for Jurassic Park 3. You can see the InGen sign up there. Actually, it's been getting kind of a facelift for the last couple of weeks, but now it does look a little worse for wear there. Looks like somebody jumped on the ceiling. Must be a dinosaur. Joe Johnston is directing it. And Sam Neill, who played Dr. Grant in the first one, coming back for the third one. William H. Macy is also going to be in Jurassic Park 3. Now this log cabin coming up on the right, it was built for the great outdoors starring John Candy and Dan Aykroyd. This is not a facade. This is called a practical set. What that means is it has all 4 exterior walls and it has real rooms on the inside so we can do both interior and exterior filming here. Now, we're coming toward the end of the tour. It seems only fitting to talk about film finales. A number of them have featured this backdrop here on the right. You can still kind of see it behind all the scaffolding for Jurassic Park 3. It was up to that backdrop that Jim Carrey sailed to the end of his world in Paramount's The Truman Show. And back in January, the lake was drained much like it is today. They had built a desert in the dry lake bed and painted the backdrop as Monument Valley for Sony and Columbia Pictures' Charlie's Angels. And it was the entire Atlantic Ocean for the splashdown sequences from Apollo 13. We have wave machines to put under the water, which are all basically mechanical effects, as we talked about in King Kong, and they're very effective. But in the last 10 years, CGI, or computer-generated imagery, has really revolutionized the filmmaking process. Digital effects can make anything possible in Hollywood anymore. A great example of that is our hit film The Mummy, which used digital effects to resurrect one of our own classic monsters. I'm going to bring up that film's writer-director, Mr. Stephen Sommers. He's going to tell us a little bit more about the making of The Mummy.